Our top story, the Afghan city of Mazar-e-Sharif has fallen to the Taliban, marking the complete loss of Afghanistan's north to the militant group. The fall of the city has been confirmed by local and provincial officials. Mazar-e-Sharif is Afghanistan's fourth largest city and the capital of Balkh province. Earlier on Saturday, the Taliban seized control of Pul Alam, the capital of Logar province, lying 70 kilometers south of the capital, Kabul. The group began its offensive in May, but has managed to seize more than half of Afghanistan's provincial capitals in just over a week. Kabul and Jalalabad in the east are now the only major cities not in Taliban hands. Earlier, we were joined by Kazem Haidari, Iran's national broadcaster's correspondent in Mazar-e-Sharif, who gave us the latest on the situation in the Afghan city.
After the arrival of the Taliban, the city was completely taken over. The first thing the group did was to seize the city's prison. The prison doors were opened up and the majority of the inmates escaped. Currently, Taliban members are patrolling across the city of Mazar-e-Sharif on their motorcycles, and a few minutes ago it was reported that 2 Taliban militants had been shot dead by unidentified individuals near the Balkh governor's office. Before the Taliban entered Mazar-e-Sharif, Afghan government forces tried to remove military equipment from Afghanistan's largest military base in the north of Balkh province. A number of other government forces, especially police officers, gathered at the police headquarters in the Balkh province, and according to reports, the Taliban demanded that they surrender to benefit from the general pardon they have announced.
Right, let's discuss that further. Bring in Amin Alami, our correspondent in the Afghan capital, Kabul. Also, Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, joining us from the British city of Bristol. I mean, firstly, if you can, provide us the latest on what's going on the ground.
Well, the city of Mazar-e-Sharif in northern Afghanistan came under the control of Taliban without any resistance by Afghan military forces, particularly the Afghan army forces. Thousands of Afghan army forces were stationed in Shaheen Corps of Afghan National Army in northern Balkh province. According to Atta Mohammed Noor, who was the former governor of Balkh, and Marshal Abdul Rashid Dostum, who had earlier pledged to defend the city at any cost, they have become the victim of, according to this prominent political leader, a cowardly plot. This is because, according to this political leader in northern Afghanistan, the commander of Shaheen Corps in northern Afghanistan has retreated and handed over all military equipments to the Taliban without any resistance, without resisting against the assailants, who are said to be more than 500 fighters who are currently inside the city of Mazar-e-Sharif. I talked to my own friends and my own relatives who are currently living inside the city of Mazar-e-Sharif. When I asked my own uncle that, are you aware that the city of Mazar-e-Sharif is collapsed into the hands of Taliban, he said that we have never heard gunfire inside the city, so how it is collapsed into the hands of Taliban. It also shows that the city was handed over to the Taliban without any resisting. It is also sad that another major city in eastern Afghanistan, that is Jalalabad, is going to be handed over to the Taliban just tomorrow. In the meantime, the Afghan President Mohammad Ashraf Ghani recently said...
Okay, sound glitch. Our correspondent. Let's switch over to Tony. Tony, there's one big, if you can, and then I'll get your thoughts on other aspects as well, but one thing that is very reminiscent, when you hear like terms like ghost soldiers, officials fleeing, US trained army, can we draw parallels with Iraq in the summer of 2014 when Daesh took over? And I mean, it's so similar to that.
Well, Look, I mean, what the United States and NATO have been doing around the world is pretty similar in many of these countries. Of course, most of the countries they've been devastating are Islamic countries, and no one seems to really point that out. Look, but what's been going on, I think, in Afghanistan is, I mean, I heard on the BBC here, on the radio, a soldier who'd been fighting, a British soldier out there, and lost his leg. And he was complaining to the BBC reporter, what did I lose my leg for? What was this point of all of this? For 20 years, apparently, British soldiers been fighting out there for some kind of international justice. Well, it was, of course, it was nothing to do with that. They were just pawns in a much bigger game. And I think there's also, of course, the people who are more annoyed and more disgusted in the UK here are those who've actually lost loved ones out there. So, you know, this is a major, major issue, which I think this wave of news we've had over the last week of various parts of Afghanistan. Now it looks like possibly Kabul falling to the Taliban. Really, I don't think we should be surprised about the lack of gunfire, though, because basically what's happened is the resistance to the Taliban in many of these places has just vaporized. And so the Taliban have been able to just kind of walk into some towns and cities. Well, I don't know about cities, but certainly into towns, because the forces that were against them have just disappeared and gone home. And also, of course, that many of the people who the West has been employing, NATO has been employing as a kind of puppet regime, well, they were taking the pay, but their heart wasn't in it. And so as soon as their boss has left the room or left the office, then they revert to type. Then they've gone native and gone back to being the Afghans that they always were, and the patriots that were fighting against an occupying force from, would you believe, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which the North Atlantic, last time I looked on a map, is about 5,000 miles away, and there's absolutely nothing to do whatsoever with Afghanistan. So, you know, the whole thing, I think, is really just a collapse. But I'll just finish on one point, because I do know some Afghans, and they tell me that many people in Afghanistan believe that the Taliban were actually a part of a US puppet organization that was funded via the Pakistani ISI. So there is a lot of Afghans, ordinary Afghans, that don't necessarily think that the Taliban are really what they're trained or cut out to be, or they're not actually really the legitimate rulers of the country, that ordinary people don't see them as necessarily the best people to be running the show. Although, you know, just to say finally, one of the most brilliant things the Taliban did do before the invasion in 2001 by NATO was they stopped the growing of opium poppies, and they completely reined back the opium supply, something, of course, which the Western deep state, I don't think, could ever have forgiven them for, because ever since the invasion, that has absolutely mushroomed. Fantastic amounts of opium flooding the world markets from Afghanistan, which of course is used to create illegal slush funds for covert operations by the deep state.
Okay, so Tony, very quickly, we've got 2 or 3 minutes left. I mean, again, I go back to the same question, not making comparisons with the Taliban and Daesh. One is a terror group, the other one maybe has some kind of would be acceptable to the Afghan people in certain parts of the country. But nevertheless, it's the United States' role here in 2 decades. What has it achieved? It invaded under the pretext of the 9/11 attacks and the so-called war on terror. But nevertheless, you can say, you know, the mother of foreign policy blunders. Where does it in your, I mean, where would you say it falls under foreign policy blunders?
I mean, okay, so look, let's try and make sense of it. First of all, why are the troops coming home now? Well, it may well be that there are other plans afoot geopolitically, so those troops might be being trained for operations elsewhere in the world. That's a big possibility. But then, you know, obviously, Daesh, ISIS is still out there in Afghanistan, and wouldn't it be entertaining for the Pentagon to have 2 different puppet organisations, one which is that they can manipulate through Pakistan, the Taliban, and the other which is Daesh or ISIS? So the whole thing could become another theatre of war. But the main problem, or the main point of all of this, is to deny Afghanistan to countries like Russia and China, so they can't have an ally. And if they have got an ally, that ally is likely to be a war-torn basket case. And that is, it seems to me, Dan Glazebrook's book, Divide and Ruin, explains the NATO policy. If they cannot control a country, and obviously they found they couldn't control Afghanistan, what they like to see is total chaos in that country to deny it to their rival superpowers. And so I think that's maybe why we can make sense of, first of all, why the withdrawal now. Other plans may well be afoot. Watch this space. Keep an eye on what NATO is up to. They may be planning something else along with the Israelis, perhaps. And secondly, the idea really is to, I think, to continue the destabilisation of Afghanistan by other means. Of course, we've seen all these airstrikes, and what an incredible thing it is to see the United States actually begging the Taliban to spare its embassy. You know, they're having to send all these troops, they've just withdrawn them, but they're having to send them back now to Afghanistan to rescue their embassy staff. And so I think that I think sums up for me what's going on. If we can say it, is they're going to be looking to destabilise it through airstrikes, etc., in the future.
You raise too many interesting points, Tony, as always. Thank you very much indeed. There is indeed a chaotic situation out there. We'll see how it unfolds. Thank you very much for your time. And Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, joining us out from Bristol. We also had Amin Alami, our correspondent, who joined us earlier from the Afghan capital, Kabul.